I never thought I would be telling this story, but what I saw changed my life forever, even now as I sit here. The memories are so vivid, it feels as if I never truly returned. I hesitated for a long time before speaking about this, afraid of how people would react, afraid that the world wouldn't believe me. But after what I experienced, I have no choice. It was October 12th, 2023, a normal evening, or so I thought. I had just finished a grueling 12-hour shift at the hospital. Being a nurse meant exhaustion was a constant companion. But that night, fatigue settled into my bones, heavier than usual. I remember glancing at the dashboard clock, 11:47 p.m. The roads were empty, silent, the kind of quiet that makes you feel alone, even when you know the world is still out there, breathing, existing. I wasn't far from home, maybe 10 minutes away, when it happened. One moment, I was driving, my fingers drumming absent-mindedly on the steering wheel, my mind already picturing my warm bed. The next, there was a flash. Headlights appearing out of nowhere, too fast, too close. A scream got caught in my throat as the impact came like a thunderclap, shattering glass, twisting metal, my body thrown violently against the seatbelt. The world spun. I remember the sickening weightlessness, the feeling of my soul being yanked from my body, and then silence. No, more pain, no more sound. Just an overwhelming stillness that swallowed everything. I felt light, unburdened, as if I had been stripped of something I didn't even realize I carried. I tried to move, but there was no body to move. Instead, I was floating, drifting upward, away from the wreckage, away from the crumpled shell of myself still trapped behind the wheel. I should have been afraid. I should have panicked. But what I felt in that moment was something else entirely. A pull, a gentle but undeniable force, drawing me higher. It was then that I saw it. A brilliance, beyond anything I had ever known. A light so pure it wasn't just seen, but felt, as if it had a presence, a consciousness. It called to me, not with words, but with a knowing, a deep understanding that resonated in the core of my being. And then, just as I surrendered to it, just as I allowed myself to be taken into its embrace, everything changed. I hovered above the wreckage, weightless, suspended in a space that felt neither here nor there. Below me, the shattered remains of my car sat in twisted silence. Steam rising from the crumpled hood, the glow of emergency lights painted the dark road in pulses of red and blue, their flashing reflections dancing across shards of broken glass. I should have felt pain, but there was none. I should have been afraid, but instead, an eerie calm settled over me, as if the world had loosened its grip, and I was merely an observer to a life I no longer belonged to. Then I saw them, the paramedics. They moved with urgency, their voices sharp, commanding, but I couldn't make out their words. One of them crouched beside my body, pressing 2 fingers against my neck before shaking his head. Another cut away my shirt, exposing my chest, as a third positioned the defibrillator paddles. I watched as my lifeless form jerked violently with each shock, but I felt nothing. That was me. And yet, it wasn't. A strange detachment settled over me. The person on the ground, the one they were fighting to save, felt like a memory, a fading imprint of who I used to be. Then came the sirens. More voices. A police officer speaking into his radio. A woman's scream, my wife. She wasn't supposed to be here, and yet, somehow, she was. I turned toward the sound, and there she was, standing just beyond the chaos, her face frozen in horror, her hands trembling as they clutched her phone. She called my name, her voice raw, broken, but I couldn't answer. I tried to reach for her, to let her know I was still here, still me. But my hands, if I even had hands, passed through the space between us like mist. Then came my daughter's name, barely a whisper on my wife's lips. A plea, a desperate prayer. That was when it hit me, the reality of it. I was gone. I should have felt sorrow, regret. But instead, something else took hold. Something vast and unknowable. A pull. Not a force, not a push, but a calling. A silent invitation that resonated through every fiber of whatever I had become. It didn't demand. It didn't command. It simply was. And then, the light. It wasn't the harsh, sterile glow of the ambulance, or the burning blaze of headlights. This was different. It was warmth. A presence. An all-encompassing radiance that stretched beyond sight and into feeling. It didn't blind. It embraced. It wasn't light in the way the world knows light. It was alive. And the moment I saw it, I understood. It was calling me home. I drifted toward it, drawn by a peace deeper than any I had ever known. The weight of the world, every worry, every regret, every lingering attachment began to dissolve. The farther I moved from my body, the less it mattered. The grief, the pain, the fear, all of it faded until only one thing remained, love. And then I heard it, a voice, not spoken, not heard, but known, a whisper in my soul, calling my name. I couldn't see him, but I knew Jesus, a presence so powerful, so overwhelming in love and authority, that I trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper. Reverence, awe, the kind of knowing that needs no proof. He was there. I couldn't see him, but I felt him in the light, in the warmth, in the very essence of everything that surrounded me. And then, at last, I saw him, Jesus, and what he showed me, I can never forget. The moment I saw him, every ounce of my being trembled. Not in fear, but in something deeper, something words could never truly capture. Or reverence, a knowing so absolute that it shattered every doubt, every question I had ever carried about what lay beyond this life. Jesus stood before me, not as an image or a dream, but as something more real than anything I had ever known. His presence was light. Not just shining, but alive, flowing like liquid gold, wrapping around me in warmth that filled every hollow space within me. His eyes, oh, his eyes, burned with a fire that was both fierce and tender, holding the weight of eternity, yet brimming with love, so deep, so consuming. It felt as if he saw through every layer of who I was, down to the very essence of my soul. And in that gaze, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't ashamed. I was known. When he spoke, it wasn't sound as I had always understood it. His voice carried through me, reverberating in my spirit, as if my very existence was responding to him. It was both a whisper and a thunderclap, filled with a power that could shape galaxies, yet gentle enough to mend the most shattered heart. My child, he said, his words flowing into me like rivers of living water. I have brought you here for a reason. What I am about to show you must be shared with my people. His words held weight, an urgency that sent shivers through my being. I wanted to respond, to say yes, to fall at his feet in surrender, but a doubt stirred deep within me, a shadow of my own smallness against the vastness of who he was. Lord, I whispered, my voice barely a breath, I'm just a nurse. Who will believe me? His expression didn't change. He had already known my hesitation before I spoke it. A softness touched his eyes, but beneath it, an unshakable certainty. "I have always used the humble to confound the wise," he said, his voice steady, unyielding. "You were chosen, not for who the world sees you as, but for who I have made you to be." A warmth filled me at his words. Not just comfort, but certainty. As if, for the first time in my existence, I saw myself not through my own frailty, but through his purpose. Then, Jesus took my hand. The moment his fingers closed around mine, a power surged through me, pure, radiant, limitless. It wasn't just light, it was life itself, coursing through me like fire, yet without pain. Only an overwhelming, soul-deep knowing. The world around us shifted, blurred, melted away as something greater took its place. And suddenly we were somewhere else. The moment we left that place, the warmth of his presence remained, but the light around us began to shift. I was no longer standing in the ethereal radiance of heaven. I was somewhere else entirely. It was a city, but unlike any I had ever seen before. Towering skyscrapers stretched high into the sky, their smooth mirrored surfaces reflecting a world that pulsed with a strange, artificial glow. The air hummed with unseen energy, and everywhere I looked, people moved with an effortless grace, connected to something invisible, yet inescapable. They carried no wallets, no phones. Transactions happened in an instant. A wave of the hand, a blink of an eye. A woman walked into a cafe, grabbed a drink, and left without ever stopping to pay. The system already knew who she was. A man stepped onto a train without a ticket. His identity confirmed the moment he crossed the threshold. No keys, no passwords, no cash. Just a seamless, frictionless existence, all made possible by something beneath the skin. I turned to see a church, grand, beautiful, filled with worshippers. But as I watched, I felt something off, something subtle but undeniable. People entered the sanctuary, their hands outstretched, not in surrender to God, but to be scanned. A small light flickered as they placed their palms beneath a glowing censer. Tithes deducted instantly. Records updated in real time. No need for passing offering plates. No need for trust in unseen provision. It was efficient, convenient, but something in my spirit recoiled. "Lord," I breathed, my voice barely above a whisper. "What is this?" Jesus stood beside me, his gaze sorrowful yet steady. "The enemy does not force his way in," he said, his voice resonating through me like a solemn melody. "He comes as an angel of light." I watched as more people embraced the technology with open arms. Parents microchipping their children for safety. Workers implanting access chips for convenience. Entire cities moving toward a world where identity, commerce, and security were all tied to a single system. It was happening so subtly, so gradually, that no one questioned it. It made life easier. It solved problems. And yet, beneath the surface, something dark coiled, waiting. Then I saw him. At first, he seemed like any other leader. Charismatic, well-spoken, a man of reason and unity. He stood before world governments, advocating for peace, for order, for a future free from chaos. He didn't demand obedience. He inspired it. He spoke with a gentle authority, promising a world where no child would go missing, no identity could be stolen, no money could be lost. He called for unity, for trust in the system, for faith in the advancement of humankind. Religious leaders stood beside him, nodding in agreement, assuring their followers that this was good, that this was progress, and the world listened. "Lord," I whispered, my heart pounding, "is this the mark of the beast?" Jesus' gaze never wavered. "Not yet," he said, Then he turned to me, his eyes filled with both sorrow and urgency. But watch how the deception unfolds. The world began to shift again, and suddenly, I was no longer standing in the seamless futuristic city. What had once been a world of convenience, and progress was now unraveling, thread by thread. Chaos spread like a shadow, creeping through nations like an unstoppable tide. The streets that had been bustling with effortless transactions were now filled with desperation. The global economy crumbled overnight, markets collapsed, currencies lost their value, and what little hope people had clung to was slipping through their fingers. Fear became the new currency, and the world was drowning in it. Then came the war, not one between nations, but something deeper, more insidious, a conflict that didn't need borders to spread. Civil unrest erupted in every corner of the earth. Governments grasped for control, deploying forces to maintain order. But the world had already begun to spiral into something beyond their grasp. Disease followed close behind, sweeping through the weakened masses. Like a fire consuming dry grass, supplies dwindled, hospitals overflowed, and the people cried out for salvation. And then, as if right on cue, he returned. The leader who had once whispered promises of unity now stood before the world, no longer pleading, no longer persuading. He came with a final solution, a perfect answer to humanity's suffering, a new system, they called it. The next step in human evolution. With the wave of a hand, transactions could be completed, access granted, security ensured. No more theft, no more fraud, no more hunger for those who accepted it. One single biometric implant, the key to buying, selling, and surviving, and the people welcomed it. They had already been primed, conditioned to see it as a blessing rather than a curse. It was logical, it was fair, it was safe, and so they lined up, eager to receive what they believed would restore their lives, unaware of what it would truly cost them. I saw them, men, women, children, rolling up their sleeves, offering their hands, their foreheads. The process was quick, painless, a mere moment of submission to something they did not understand. And as they walked away, they smiled, relieved, reassured. But I saw what they could not, their souls. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable, a dimming, a quieting of something unseen. Then, as more and more people took the mark, the shift became undeniable. They could still speak, still pray, still call on the name of God, but the connection was gone. Their voices echoed into an emptiness that had never been there before. I turned to Jesus, my heart breaking with what I was witnessing. His face was filled with sorrow, his eyes heavy with grief, as if he had seen this moment long before I had ever existed. Lord, I choked out, my voice shaking. They don't know. They don't see what's happening to them. He looked at me, his expression unwavering, yet filled with the deepest sorrow I had ever known. Those who take this, he said, his voice carrying both the weight of finality and the tenderness of a last warning, can no longer hear my voice. The moment it happened, it felt like being struck by lightning. A violent force ripped me from the presence of Jesus, from the vastness of eternity, and hurled me back into the confines of my body. Pain exploded through me, a sudden crushing weight, as if I had been buried alive beneath the heaviness of the world. My lungs burned, my chest heaved, and for a terrifying moment, I thought I was drowning in air. Then, the voices, he's back, vitals, stabilizing, stay with us. The world around me flickered in and out, a blur of fluorescent lights, frantic faces, and beeping machines. I gasped, the sterile scent of the hospital filling my nostrils, the sting of IVs piercing my skin. Every nerve in my body screamed, but nothing compared to the aching emptiness inside me. The unbearable loss of him. I was back. But I didn't belong here anymore. Tears streamed down my face as the weight of what I had seen crashed over me. It wasn't just a dream, a hallucination from the brink of death. It was real. Every second, every word Jesus had spoken, every terrifying glimpse of the future, it was burned into me, deeper than memory, deeper than anything this world could erase. I tried to speak, to tell them what had happened, but my voice was weak, my body barely able to move. The doctors and nurses worked around me, their faces relieved, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. They had saved me, but they had no idea what I had just seen. The vision wouldn't leave me. It played over and over in my mind like a prophecy, unfolding in real time. The seamless integration of technology, the gradual deception, the leader who would promise salvation but deliver enslavement, and worst of all, the mark that would sever souls from God, cutting them off forever. Then, one night, as I lay in that hospital bed, the TV flickered on. The news anchor's voice was calm, reassuring, talking about advancements in biometric technology, new security measures being implemented worldwide. A convenience, they called it. A way to protect people. It was happening. Tears filled my eyes. I had to warn them. I had to tell everyone, but Jesus had already warned me. Many will not believe. I closed my eyes, my heart pounding with urgency, my soul still echoing with the weight of his words. If you are listening now, you must prepare. Stay close to him. Do not be deceived.